Thank each and every one of you for being here today. Again, my name is Larry Campbell. My Indian name is Wanasia. My Indian name comes from Nanaimo, Nanaimo's First Nations people on Vancouver Island. And I'm part Skagit, part Swinomish, part Samish, Kikialis, Wenatchee First Band. I call it being the Heinz 57 of Indian country. And, also part Welsh, so my mother's maiden name was Williams, so there's a lot of us in our tribal communities here. There's a lot of Williamses on every reservation, but we don't seem to be related in the Indian way. Maybe someday we'll sit down and compare notes and we'll find out we're related in the Welsh way, because I hear it was quite a common name back in the old days. But again, I'm happy to be here today. My job description at home right now is that one of the job descriptions that I'm kind of known for is I was a Tribal Historic Preservation Officer, which basically meant I took care of the archaeological sites. And now I'm the Community Health Specialist. So I work with our scientists and our scientific arm at Swinomish to be able to look at helping us design ways that we can go back and do science in an Indigenous way, or do Swinomish type of science. And I really got this from Deloria quite a number of years ago. He was speaking at the University of Washington at Kane Hall, and I went to see him. And I was just starting my work in archaeology and the cultural resources, and he was saying, you know, the archaeologists, when they go back into the southeast corner of the United States, they keep asking these questions about the Mound people there. And they never find what they're really looking for. Why? He says, they're asking the wrong questions. He said, if they'd only come and talk to us while they're developing their research questions, maybe they'd begin to find out what they're looking for. And that planted a seed with me, and he said that maybe, just maybe, that the tribal people in the old days had different capabilities, had different powers, abilities to do things, rather than the archaeologists trying to figure out how many slaves it took to build the pyramids. And he said maybe there was another avenue to that they've never considered. So I kind of looked at that as a challenge, and just saying, how can we look into what archaeology and what science is doing, and begin to find these answers that some of the gaps in our oral history that we've been searching for. And I think when you look at all the books that Deloria has published, many people look at the books that he wrote as an endpoint, as that he's telling us, giving us this information on which to argue with Western science. Really, when I look at Deloria's work, I look at it as a starting point for us as Indigenous scholars. This is a starting point that we can look at that information that he's provided and go, what is next? What do we say here in this presentation? Where do we go from here? The ever popular question, where do we go from here? Well, his ideas that he gave us, that we need to take it deeper. We need to take it deeper. And then we can begin, I think, as we go along, we'll begin to be able to fill in these gaps. Pretty soon, we're going to find out a lot of the knowledge that we have that is passed down to us from time immemorial, that is going to be verified by science. The scientists continue to tell us that we're wrong, and we're not. Sometimes what we do in Indian country so much is based on intuition, our instinct. Where does it come from? I remember Meryl Streep saying this being interviewed one time. She was saying, where does it come from? Her ability to act. She had no idea where it come from, but she wasn't going to question it because it was there and it was real. And for us, for a lot of us as Indian people, that instinct, that intuition, that thing, we're taught not to doubt it. But if we listen to it and we act onto it, we're not going to make mistakes in our lives. It helps us become whoever we need to become. I think that as we develop Northwest Indian College, it's important too that we're starting to build on both sides of that. Place-based education. Proud of the elders here in Alumni who said that this will be a traditional type education. Some of the ones I talked to were angry because there was too much academics. But still too, we have to hit both parts of it. You think about it as time goes by, when we build up our academic skills here at Northwest Indian College for our students, and we build up our traditional education to where the people could use it to very fine measure that how much stronger that they're going to be. Where do we fail students today in today's world? We fail students because that we are sometimes a failure at recognizing what their gifts are. Once that we can find out where their gifts are, all you have to do is point them in the right way, and they will find their way. The right doors will open. They've always told us that. When you are ready, the teacher will appear. I found that to be true in my own life. Hardest thing I ever had to do was put my boat away in 1991 to go back to college. I didn't go to Northwest Indian College. I went to Skagit Valley College for 3 years. Went to Western for 3 years. I didn't know why. I just knew it was important. But when I got my degree from there, I realized that I had built up a lot of relationships in those organizations. And they serve me well yet here today. And now I have the opportunity of serving on the board of Northwest Indian College because I believe in a traditional education. I started receiving some of my traditional education about 40 years ago. And I'm still trying to figure out today what they told me 40 years ago. I thought I knew. Unlike a lot of human beings, I know this. I know this. Then 10 years later, 15 years later, an awakening happens, and I said, I didn't know that at all. My face get all red and all embarrassed. I was talking a concept one time on the floor because I'm one of our traditional speakers, and at a funeral no less, and I'd realized I'd misunderstood that concept. I corrected myself, and I got so embarrassed I turned around and run for my chair. And halfway there, one of my elders from Swinomish, one of the ladies, stopped me, pulled me over, and she says, we knew you were going to get it one day, Larry. And I was amazed. They let me make this mistake for 10 years because they saw I was working my way towards it. Now that's patience. They say they give us a lot of our teachings, our spiritual teachings, our traditional teachings. They gave it 2/3 of it, and we have to figure out the rest. You only get what you put into it. So I think this is what we need to look at, and we are looking at Northwest Indian College. How can we institute that type of education to where 40 years after our students graduate, that they're still learning? They still have an inquisitive mind and trying to figure out, where do we go from here? What is the next step? What does it lead to? Most of us as human beings, we overthink it. Why? We go to Western, we go to University of Washington, we go to these universities. They force us to come to conclusions sometimes before we're ready. Before we're ready. I'd ask a lot of my classmates up at Western, did you read this book? No, I just got what I needed out of it. And I said, wow, there's a lot of information there that you missed out on. How many of you got your textbooks from your college days at home that you brought home and promised to read? I got all mine. Still haven't read them. But I think that these are the things that we're looking at Northwest Indian College, and this is what we're looking at in our tribal communities. We're looking to identify our strengths that we have as Coast Salish people, as traditional people. And once that we can find these strengths, and once we get these things on good solid foundation, we can do whatever we set out to do. We can go out and become these scientists, these PhDs in science. At home in my community, one of the jobs I do for my community, I do culture orientations for new employees. Most of the time they're designed for non-Indians who come to work for us, because we have a lot of non-Indians who work for us because of the educational level that is needed for some of the jobs that we have. And I tell them that it takes us 2 years to retrain you to think like Swinomish. With PhDs, it takes longer. And maybe it don't for some of them, but the idea behind it is that you have to change the way that you do things. We are like a foreign country. We think differently. And you're going to have to learn how to do things in a Swinomish way. We're not going to bend to you. You have to bend to us. Aaron, it was good to hear you talk too, because I was talking to her earlier that I have her counterpart in Swinomish, Jamie Donatudo, who some of you know we did a presentation here in a Coast Salish speaker series. And these were long plane rides across the nation from Washington, D.C. with me talking in her ear and telling her about these things that make us uniquely Swinomish. And she was the one who figured out how to put it into work. The work that we're doing with these Indigenous health indicators is an idea of going back and going to our tribal communities, going to our elders, going to our aunts, our uncles, and our cousins, to find out what are the tribes, what are the community's priorities, not the scientists' priorities. When you look at Western science, we treat science like a religion today in this world. We give them untold latitude to do whatever they damn well please. I'm not on the boat anymore. But again, when Jamie and I presented our work across this country, the Western traditionals, the ones who's been trained in the Western method, get really angry at us because they see that we're taking the development of the research question and going back into the community with it and asking the community, what are your preferences? What do you want us to study? What do you want us to look at? Rather than having the scientists do that, someone who may be completely unfamiliar with our culture and with our ways of life. And how do we take this knowledge that a lot of us as tribal people have and to bring it into a way that makes it into policy? Our traditions, our spirituality, we've been taught to keep it close to the vest. We've been taught to keep it private, keep it to ourselves. Why? Because that for it to remain in a good, pure way, we needed to keep it from the Western influence so that we could keep it as pure as that we could. But I think the day is coming now that we are starting to learn as tribal organizations on how to share these principles that we live our life by, that are hard to codify. They're hard to codify, but how do we bring those into codification that would satisfy all of us in all of our different understandings that we know of our traditional and our family law? Talking to nature reminds me of a story. We were fishing out in Skagit Bay one day, and the seals were running our net. You fishermen know about seals. They were stealing our fish. And the guy who taught me how to fish, he says, watch this, Larry. And we watched out there for a while. The seal come and took 2 of our king salmon. And then he left. And I said, what'd you do? He said, I talked to him. I said, you can have 2 of our fish, and after you're done taking 2 of our fish, go pick on our brother down the next boat down. And they did. Seal took 2 of those fish, and then he went down and bothered our brother down the line there. And left us alone. And it worked. I watched him. We were sitting on the Skagit River one day. He looked upriver, he looked downriver. And every time he did that, I say, okay, when there's no fish here today, so we're going to go somewhere else to find a fish. And we always found a fish. And I asked him, what made you make you decide to go upriver rather than downriver? He says, I don't know, it just felt right. And after the boat decision, the white guy said that we needed a white book, a white man's invention to learn how to fish. Our people are fishermen. They can sense the tide. Sure, they look at the book, but I think they sense it more and they feel it, and they understand it. They become in tune to it. And so these are the things that we would like to get back into our lives. We need a good, close environment. We need to have healing in our communities. I see education, Northwest Indian College, I'm going to say Western for that matter, as a good tool to provide some of that healing. But a lot of that healing is going to come with us being able to resume this lifestyle that we've had from time immemorial. We too in Swinomish call ourselves the salmon people. We identify ourselves with the salmon. That's where our wealth comes from. It allowed us to be rich. It allowed us to be rich. We're probably the richest people in all of North America because of the salmon. And all the other things in life that we had come very intimate with. So I'm grateful to be here today. And let me end with a story. I do this when we do the Indigenous health indicators. It's a story I tell that happened in our community with me and one of my brothers. But one day we were riding around drinking a few beers, and my buddy's grandmother popped his head out the door, and she says, "Grandson, it's time to go get mussels." "Okay, Grandma." So off we went to Whidbey Island, peeled a bunch of mussels off the rocks. We took it back home, took it to the beach, we cooked it up, and they were just about done, so we sent word down to our community. A lot of mussels down the beach. Come on down, help yourself if you want some mussels. A lot of people from the res come down, helping themselves to the mussels. And I saw my friend's mother. She was eating mussels really, really fast. And then every now and then she'd reach in her purse and grab something, pop it in her mouth. And I asked my brother, I said, "Well, how come your mother's eating so fast?" He said, "I don't know, ask her." And he says, "Well," so I went and asked her, and she says, "Oh, I'm allergic to these mussels. They're going to make me sick. That's why I'm eating Benadryl. I'm going to get sick here pretty soon." I said, "If it's making you sick, why are you eating it?" She says, "Because my spirit demands it." So my colleague, Jamie Donatudo, she did her PhD thesis on the idea, what do you do when our traditional foods are necessary for the spirit but poison to the body? So this is the dilemma that we as Coast Salish people are facing here today, and that we're going to enter into agreement and being able to work with one another, find ways. We're going to combine our minds together. Our two different things, instead of making them complete, distinct, and separate, let's find a way to bring it together so they work together. Hajkasasim.